Yeah, in 5 minutes, the future of the European Union. I think that's impossible, but I want first of all to say welcome to all of you, journalists from the four corners of Europe, to the European Parliament. And the reason why we have taken this item, the future of Europe, as the title of this seminar, is because to inform you about an exercise that the European Parliament has started in the beginning, more or less, of this year, an exercise that will last 2-3 years, and in which exercise we try to go further. We try to prepare the reform of the European Union as we see is necessary. Is necessary for two reasons. First of all, because the European Union is faced with what we call polycrisis, migration crisis, security crisis inside, security crisis and geopolitical weakness outside, the fallout of the financial crisis is yet not absorbed at this moment. Our banks are not cleaned, our banks are not recapitalized, and the Japanese winter in which we entered with the European Union in 2009 is still continuing in the coming years. We call that a polycrisis. And at the same time, the existence itself of the European Union is questioned. And the most evident sign of that was naturally the decision by the British citizens to leave the European Union, the Brexit, which will be a negotiation that will start by the end of March, will take 2 years, and at the end of the process, it will be the European Parliament who has to give his consent to this withdrawal agreement on the one hand, and the new agreement, the new relationship that we will negotiate with the UK for the future. So the Parliament is of the opinion that in parallel with these Brexit negotiations that will start now, everybody is preparing it. The Commission is preparing with Michel Barnier. We are preparing ourselves. My previous meeting was of the CCC, all the committees combined, where we are starting to prepare these negotiations. Well, we are saying that besides these Brexit negotiations, that will be done by European Commission, European Parliament from day one, and Council with the UK, there is a need to do this reform of the European Union, this preparation of reform of the European Union in parallel with the Brexit negotiations, who normally will be concluded in a time frame of 2 years. And the Council have started already also this exercise. That is what happened at the Bratislava summit, and that will continue in the coming months in a new summit in February, in a new gathering, very important, in Rome at the 25th anniversary, 25th of March. There will be the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome in Rome. And so this Council have started with 27, not with 28, this exercise to say, what reformed European Union we need to be fit for the future after the departure of the UK and after we have concluded on this new relationship. Well, the Parliament, in the beginning of this year already, started with a similar, may I say, even more broadened exercise than the Council to also be prepared for that. And that is based on, in total, 4 reports. I'm going to add one now that I see here in the list, and that is the reason of this programme of today. It are 4 reports. That is a first important report. We call that the first BB report. Everything is with BB here in the Parliament. That is the Bressot-Brok report. And the Bressot-Brok report is about what is the reform of the European Union we can achieve within the institutional framework as it is today, within the Lisbon Treaty. That's the report of Mrs. Bressot and Mr. Brok. There is a report of a second report. We call that also the second BB report. That is the Böge Beres report in the Parliament, and that's about how the Eurozone has to work in the future. Fiscal capacity for the Eurozone, treasury for the Eurozone, all this new governance based on convergence from the new Eurozone, because we say, the Stability Pact, that doesn't work. Some countries feel happy because it exists but it doesn't apply, and other countries feel happy also because it still exists even when it is not applied. So that doesn't work. We need a real governance for the Eurozone, and that's the second report. And then the third report is my report. I have my first name is Guy, not B. So unfortunately, and it's about what is the reforms beyond the institutional framework of today, beyond the Lisbon Treaty we need for the future. And there is then a fourth report that is coming, and that is in fact linked to the Mario Monti high-level group of own resources, and that is about the future financing of the European Union. Will also be at stake because of the departure of the British, the rebate disappears. So normally the rebates on the rebates gonna disappear. Rebate on the rebate, that is the advantage, financial advantage that 4 countries, Denmark, Sweden, Germany and the Netherlands have today, because they don't have to finance 100% the rebate of the British, so they have a rebate on the rebate. So that's going to disappear. What will be the future financing system of the Union? Can we have a direct financing system now that the rebate has disappeared? Will disappear in the future. That are the 4 key reports that will be the building blocks for the position of the Parliament in this second track in parallel with the first track. So I'm going to not explain or hold my report to you. I think that it's possible that it will be given to, it's already there, everybody can read it, but mainly what, and I'm going to be very short, what we try to do is there to have what I already said, another system for the governance of the euro with a European government. Commission has to be changed, reformed in a small European government of 12, 15 people, and we have to stop with the idea that every member state needs to have a commission and a portfolio, because we have not enough portfolios to give to all the commissioners. We create, in fact, a 2-chamber system, that's the proposal, where you have the European Parliament, and next to the European Parliament, we should transform the actual council in what we call a European Senate, representing the member states on an equal footing with the European Parliament and controlling that European government. There should be another system of financing based on a direct system paid by citizens and companies instead of what we have now, subsidies by member states, because that means that it are member states who still, in fact, have all the say, have all the instruments in their hands about the European Union, also to block the European Union. It proposed to solve the issue of Britain by creating what already the founding fathers had in mind in the 50s, in 53 already, and it is an associated status. Countries outside the Union can have a relationship with the Union based on an associated status, and that can be based not only on an economic, for example, a free trade agreement or something else, that is also, can also have as a substance participation, cooperation in foreign affairs, defence matters, and so on. The proposal also further established a European Defence Union, what was a dream a few years ago, but has become concrete reality today because of what is happening in Syria, of what is happening in our neighbourhood. Countries who are not willing to talk about that. I remember that I was Prime Minister when I launched the so-called Chocolate Summit. Chocolate because you have Brussels, it's chocolate, and pralinen, as you know, is one of the specialities. Well, at that moment, everybody said, no, we don't need that. Today, the Americans have indicated, oh, if you want to do something in our neighbourhood, take your own responsibility. That is what Obama said in Hanover a few weeks ago, a few months ago. And that's a reality that we have to take on board. And from there, the idea is not the time ripe to start with. It contains other institutional changes, like, for example, is it the time not there also to solve that seat problem of the European institutions, and how we can do that in the future. And finally, it also changes the way the treaties are applied. From what moment on a change in the treaties will be applicable. It will not be necessary in the future with the system to have everybody on board. When there is a critical mass of countries approving it, then a reform of our institutions can go forward, and the others have the possibility then to accept it or to leave it. All this is naturally for the future, but a lot of these things can already be done, or first crucial steps can already be undertaken under the current Lisbon Treaty, under the current legislation and the current so-called primary law of the European Union. And that is specifically the report, the second report on which we work, next to the Beres report, and I should say then the budget report of Mrs. Bresso.
Thank you very much also for keeping to the 10-minute limit.
That's experience in the European Parliament.
Yes. Perhaps I should remind the audience that Mr. Verhofstadt has also written a booklet a couple of years ago called The United States of Europe. And a lot of the ideas...
That's 2006, that's
2006. And I see in the audience that there are some colleagues who have been here even before and who are back, and I'm pleased to see them, and who were here in 2001. And before I turn to Mrs. Bresso and ask her whether all what he's been proposing cannot be done with the existing treaties, I'd just like to ask you to remind us of the situation in 2001, because a lot of people think that this is the worst crisis we've ever experienced and that Europe should finally look at what the citizens expect from them. But having been here for quite some time, I have also this déjà vu impression, running back to the early 1990s after the Maastricht Treaty, when we found the same situation, but also in 2000-2001 when the Nice Treaty failed. There was a summit chaired by Guy Verhofstadt in 2001 called the Laken Summit, because that's where it took place in part of Brussels where the castle is located. And there was a Laken declaration adopted, which then created some sort of dynamics, which then led to a convention which was designed to come to a treaty change. You haven't talked about the convention, but do you think, compared to what happened in 2001, that we can have a similar situation and create a similar momentum also going towards treaty changes?
Well, there is one big difference, that is that the convention is now based in the treaty. That was not the case in 2001. In 2001, there was no special procedure foreseen in the European Union how to change, in fact, the treaty. The only way that was foreseen was a conference, an interinstitutional conference, intergovernmental conference between the member states. That has been changed now. First in the Constitution, that failed, and later on in the Lisbon Treaty, we rescued the Constitution. From now on, when there is an in-depth change foreseen for the treaty, a convention has to be organized in an obligatory way. And a convention is a gathering where European Parliament, representatives of the national parliaments, representatives of the member states, that means of the European Council, and the European Commission met each other in a specific format to prepare a reform, a change in depth, change, not small change, then a convention is not necessary. And if there is a convention or not, that's a decision taken by the European Parliament. If the European Parliament, if the Council want to change the treaty, and we flag it in saying this is important, then automatically this can only be done by organizing a convention. First time that we did it was in 2001. It was the Declaration of Laeken who created the convention, because that was the last paragraph of the Declaration of Laeken. And at that moment, the Declaration of Laeken had been prepared by a small group, approved by the Council. That was Jacques Delors, that was David Miliband, so not Ed Miliband, the other side of the pair of brothers. David Miliband was also Giuliano Amato, Jean-Luc Dehaene was part of it. So there were a number of people who prepared, in fact, this declaration that led automatically to the convention and to the constitution that failed, as you know, in 2005 in 2 referenda in France and in the Netherlands. Not for the good reasons, in my opinion, but okay, that's also part of history.
Okay. The question remains open whether we can draw parallels to the current situation. But unless you want to reply to that.
Yeah, but I have another example. You remember maybe that we, from time to time in the past, talked about Eurosclerose in the 80s. I compare this more with the situation not in 2001, but the situation in the 80s. Everybody was talking about Eurosclerose. Europe is finished. Europe has stagflation, it was. Now it's deflation. At that time, it was stagflation. Europe, that was the crisis of Europe at that moment, was as deep as today. And how we came out? We came out with the ideas and the proposals of Jacques Delors, the then President of the European Commission, who launched that famous idea, okay, in 1992, the world will be different, and Europe will be different. Europe will be united, and we're going to create an internal market. And he went to the European Council, and there he launched this fantastic idea that has not even completed today, when there's only 35% of our internal market that is open and unified, 65% capital, telecommunication, digital is still under, I should say, national boundaries. And that has created an enormous wave. I remember that at that time, small and medium companies started to invest and say, yeah, but we have to be ready because in 92 the markets will be open. And look to the figures. In 88, 89, 90, what the economy in Europe picked it up. We got growth figures of 3%, 3.5%. I'm telling you this story because I could also tell the story of the 60s. Every time when there was Europe coming out of the crisis, picking up a new period of economic growth, was after a decisive process of European unification and integration. And never the opposite. It was when we launched in the 60s with the Treaty of Rome, the Hans process, we got growth figures, 4-5%. When Jacques Delors, after the period of Eurosclerose, where everybody was looking to Japan, the Japanese miracle, the US, and we were, the lost continent. Well, in the 80s and the 80s, beginning of the 90s, was one of the best periods of Europe, at more than 3% economic growth. And I think that we need that again, with a number of fundamental changes in the way we govern Europe. You cannot longer govern Europe as we do today, as a loose confederation of nation states, based on the unanimity rule. Our heads of states and government are not fit for that. To come 4, 5 times, 6 times a year to Brussels and to govern Europe. I'm always comparing that. Could you imagine that the US is governed like Europe? That the 50 governors of the US come together 5, 6 times a year and they're going to decide by unanimity how it works. Everybody, if you should say, crazy they are, the Americans. Well, so crazy we are for the moment. So that is it. So or we adapt these institutions, and we adapt them because we have an opportunity with the Brexit to talk about that. Well, I think that we can launch an as so successful period as the period we got in the 60s and as the period we got in the 80s. And if we don't do that, that is the story of the Greek cities. under the Roman Empire.
Okay.
A repetition of the story of the Greek cities under the Roman Empire.